Judges sob after boys Hotel California audition loudly crying fire. The theater was full. Bright lights, restless murmurs, and the weight of thousands of dreams pressing against one stage. The audience waited, the judges sat in silence, and behind the curtain stood a boy with trembling hands and shoes that had long lost their shine. His name was Samuel, though most just called him Sam. He was only 14, yet the lines of hardship etched across his face made him look far older. Sam gripped the microphone stand, his knuckles white. He was about to perform in front of the largest crowd he had ever seen, on a stage he had never dreamed he would step on. For a boy who grew up in a forgotten corner of the city, where broken windows led in the cold winds of poverty, this was nothing short of a miracle. He had chosen Hotel California, a song he had discovered through an old, cracked radio that his late father left behind. The melody had been his companion on lonely nights, and the lyrics spoke to him in ways he could never fully explain. His father, a mechanic who loved music but never had the chance to chase dreams, used to hum it after long days in the garage. Now, with his father gone and his mother working double shifts just to put food on the table, Sam carried that song as if it were a piece of his father's soul. The audience did not know his story. All they saw was a boy with patched-up clothes and a nervous stance. Some whispered, some frowned, and even one of the judges raised an eyebrow, perhaps doubting what this boy could possibly bring. But Sam had learned not to listen to whispers. His whole life, people whispered about him, about his poverty, about the way his shoes looked, about his broken family. Tonight, he would let his voice speak louder than any whisper. The music began. At first, his voice was fragile, like a candle flickering in the wind. A few in the crowd tilted their heads, unsure. But then, as he closed his eyes and remembered his father's rough hands strumming the guitar at home, his voice grew steadier, richer, deeper. He sang not just with his throat, but with his heart. Each word carried years of loneliness, each note held the echoes of nights spent in darkness with only a song to comfort him. The judges, hardened by years of performances, felt something stir within them. The first judge, a woman known for her sharp critiques, leaned forward, her pen forgotten in her hand. The second, a man who had seen countless hopefuls fail, set down his coffee and stared, as if he could not believe what he was hearing. The third, the harshest of all, blinked rapidly, his stern expression softening against his will. Sam sang the chorus, his voice soaring, filling the theater with an energy that silenced every whisper, every doubt. People who had been skeptical moments ago now leaned forward in awe. Some held their breath. His voice was raw and unpolished, yet it was honest. And honesty has a way of breaking even the hardest hearts. As the final verse approached, Sam felt tears stinging his eyes. He remembered his mother, tired and worn, telling him to never stop dreaming even when life made dreams feel impossible. He remembered his father's laughter, now only a memory. And he remembered every moment he had been told he was too poor, too small, too insignificant to matter. He let all of it pour into his voice. When he sang the last line, the theater erupted, not with noise, but with silence so deep it rang louder than applause. And then, the silence broke. The audience rose to their feet, clapping, shouting, cheering. The sound shook the room. The judges wiped tears from their eyes. The woman judge covered her face with her hands, sobbing openly. The man who had doubted everyone now stood, clapping harder than anyone else. And the harshest judge, the one who had never once shown weakness, pressed the golden buzzer. Golden confetti rained from above as Sam stood frozen, clutching the microphone. His chest heaved, his eyes wide with disbelief. He had done it. The boy who had walked in with nothing had given everything. But behind the glory, the story of his struggles remained. Sam had not reached this stage without battles. He had faced hunger, nights without heat, and days where he went to school with torn notebooks and empty stomachs. He had been bullied for the way he dressed, mocked for daring to dream. Some neighbors had even told his mother that music was a waste of time for a boy like him. Yet, every challenge had shaped him. Every tear, every hardship, had carved out a depth in his voice that no training could teach. His struggles had not destroyed him, they had turned him into an artist who could make an entire theater weep. That night, when Sam walked off stage, he did not feel like the poor boy from the broken neighborhood anymore. He felt like a dreamer who had finally been heard. Backstage, his mother stood waiting, her eyes wet, her arms open. She had never been prouder. The video of his performance spread across the internet like wildfire. Millions watched, millions cried, millions shared his story. People who had never known his name now spoke it with admiration. They called him the boy with the voice of truth, the boy who sang from the soul, the boy who reminded the world that greatness can come from the humblest of places. Sam's life changed, but he never forgot where he came from. He returned to his neighborhood and sang for the children who looked up to him, reminding them that their dreams were worth chasing, no matter how impossible they seemed. The judges would later say it was one of the most unforgettable auditions in history. Not because of technical perfection, but because of the raw, unfiltered humanity in his performance. Sam's story was not just about music. It was about resilience, about hope, about the power of believing when the world tells you not to. His song became a beacon for every person who had ever felt small, unheard, or unwanted. And as the years went on, whenever someone asked him how he managed to turn his pain into music that touched millions, he would smile and say, "Because I sang from a place that can never be broken." That night, the judges sobbed. The audience roared, and a boy who had nothing gave the world everything. Judges sob after boy's Hotel California audition loudly crying fire. Full extended story. The theater lights dimmed, and for a moment the world seemed to pause. The host's voice boomed, calling out the next contestant. A hush fell over the crowd. Everyone leaned forward, curious, expectant. From behind the curtain, a small figure emerged, skinny, nervous, his eyes scanning the endless rows of strangers staring at him. He looked fragile under the blinding lights, almost swallowed by the size of the stage. His name was Samuel, but no one in the theater knew that yet. To them, he was just another hopeful, another dreamer, another child chasing a stage far too big for him. But for Sam, this wasn't just a performance. This was survival. This was proof that his pain, his hunger, his losses, and his broken past could still birth something beautiful. Sam's story began years before this night. Born in a neighborhood where broken glass littered the sidewalks and gunshots sometimes echoed at night, his childhood had been one of survival rather than comfort. His father had been the rock of their little family, hardworking, funny, and full of music. He worked long days at a small mechanic shop and came home with grease-stained hands, but he never forgot to sing. His old guitar, patched and scratched, sat in the corner of their tiny living room. After dinner, his father would strum and hum, filling their cramped home with melodies that made the hardships bearable. But life is cruel. One night, his father collapsed at work, and within days, he was gone. A weak heart, the doctors said. Sam's world shattered. His mother was left alone, carrying not only grief but also the heavy burden of raising two children with barely any income. She took whatever jobs she could, cleaning houses, working in diners, scrubbing floors until her hands cracked and bled. For Sam, the nights grew colder. The laughter in the house faded. What remained was his father's guitar and an old radio. One night, as Sam lay awake, unable to sleep from hunger, the radio crackled and played, Hotel California. The haunting chords, the aching voice, it struck something deep inside him. From then on, that song became his lifeline. He sang it quietly to himself when loneliness gnawed at him. He sang it while helping his mother wash dishes. He sang it to his little sister to help her sleep. But outside the walls of his home, life was merciless. At school, other kids mocked his worn-out clothes, his broken shoes, and the fact that he never had lunch money. Some teachers pitied him, others ignored him. Music was his escape, but to everyone else, it was a silly distraction. Even some neighbors whispered that he should forget about singing and focus on real work. Still, Sam sang. One day, a small talent show flyer found its way into his school. Most ignored it, but for Sam, it was a sign. With no money, no proper clothes, and no experience, he signed up. He didn't expect to win. He just wanted someone to hear him. That little performance, in a dusty school hall, was the first time anyone outside his family realized what his voice carried. Some clapped, some cried, but what mattered was that Sam felt alive. It was that moment that led him here, months later, standing on a massive stage, holding a microphone in front of judges whose opinions could change his life forever. When the music for Hotel California began, his voice shook at first, trembling like a bird unsure if it could fly. A murmur ran through the crowd. Some leaned back, unimpressed. But Sam closed his eyes and remembered his father's voice, his mother's struggles, his sister's sleepy smiles when he sang her lullabies. And suddenly, his voice found strength. The words poured out, not as a performance, but as a confession. His voice was imperfect, rough around the edges, but it carried something raw, something that cut deeper than perfection ever could. Each lyric was soaked in his pain and longing, yet laced with hope. The theater grew still. The judges sat motionless. The woman who prided herself on never crying felt her throat tighten. The older male judge, who had seen thousands of singers, found his hand clutching the desk, his eyes glistening. The harshest judge, infamous for his coldness, leaned forward, blinking rapidly as if fighting something he didn't want to feel. When Sam reached the chorus, his voice soared, echoing with a power no one expected from such a small, fragile boy. The audience's eyes widened. Some covered their mouths. Some closed their eyes and let themselves drown in his sound. By the time the final verse came, Sam was crying openly, his tears mixing with the lyrics. His voice cracked, but it only made the performance more human, more devastatingly beautiful. The last note rang out. Silence. Pure silence. For a heartbeat, the theater forgot to breathe. And then, it exploded. The audience erupted into cheers, screams, applause that shook the walls. People stood on their feet, clapping until their hands ached. Some cried openly, strangers hugging each other as if sharing a collective wound that Sam had just healed. The judges were no different. The woman sobbed uncontrollably, her mascara streaking her cheeks. The older man stood and clapped, shaking his head in disbelief. And the harshest judge, the one everyone feared, pressed the golden buzzer with trembling hands. Confetti rained from above as Sam froze, overwhelmed, his chest heaving. He dropped to his knees, the microphone slipping from his hands. For the first time in years, he felt seen. Truly seen. Backstage, his mother watched through tears, clutching his little sister tightly. She whispered, "That's your brother. That's our Sam." The video of his audition spread like wildfire across the internet. Millions watched. Millions cried. Overnight, the poor boy with the broken shoes became a global symbol of hope. His story reached people who had never known hunger, yet they felt his pain. It reached those who had lived through the same struggles and found in him a mirror of their own lives. But fame didn't change Sam. When reporters asked what kept him going, he said, "I just wanted to sing for my father. I just wanted my mother to see that all her sacrifices meant something." The judges later admitted they had never experienced such an audition. They had heard better technical voices, but never had they felt so deeply moved. "He sang from his soul," one of them said, "and that's why the world listened." Sam used his newfound fame to help others. He went back to his neighborhood, singing for children who felt forgotten. He funded music programs for kids who couldn't afford instruments. He spoke at schools, reminding children that dreams were not just for the rich, but for anyone brave enough to chase them. Years later, when Sam was asked to perform again on that same stage, he looked out at the crowd and said, "I sang Hotel California because it reminded me of my father. But I kept singing because it reminded me of myself. Music saved me, and if my voice can save even one more soul, then every struggle was worth it." The audience wept again, the judges wept again, and the boy who once stood trembling, with nothing but a broken dream, became a legend. His story was not just about music. It was about courage, about resilience, about the power of a single voice to remind the world of its shared humanity. As the years passed, Sam's name was no longer just a memory of a boy who once sang on a stage. His journey became a symbol. Schools told his story. Families replayed his audition whenever they needed hope. Even the judges, who had seen thousands of performers since, always mentioned him when asked about the moment that moved them the most. But for Sam, the real success was not the fame, not the awards, not even the stages he later conquered. His greatest achievement was walking into his old neighborhood, hearing children sing, and knowing they believed in themselves because they had seen him do it first. He never forgot his father's guitar, his mother's sacrifices, or the pain of nights without food. Instead, he carried those memories as fuel, reminders that beauty can be born from brokenness, and strength can rise from suffering. When asked years later what message he wanted to leave the world, Sam simply said, "Don't let anyone tell you your voice doesn't matter. Even if you have nothing, your heart can give everything. And when you sing from the soul, whether in music, in life, or in love, the world will listen." That was his legacy, and it all began with one trembling boy, one unforgettable song, and a stage where the judges sobbed, the audience rose, and the world discovered the power of a heart that refused to be silenced.